请收看《唯心世界》，义工利人天。
All right, we still have about 20 minutes for any questions, if anybody has any questions.
The movement was spreading very slowly, and then there was a master in Michigan, bookstore owner, the metaphysical bookstore, who said, yeah, I'll make you a master for 600. And that's when the movement exploded. And it was a very interesting phenomenon. I was there when it happened.
It's amazing.
Responsible for the explosion? Were you responsible for the explosion?
No, the bookstore owner in Michigan was responsible for it. No.
I am the Reiki master myself, and my teacher insists that we should take money. That is the explanation is that through you, because it's not, it's like if I do something to somebody, not something, a session to somebody, it's not me, it's through me. This energy doesn't belong to me. But the teacher is insisting that is like to be appreciated, as Takata also was saying, that is like if people get it for free, they don't appreciate. But for some reason, my internal feeling is I never take money. Because it's, I don't know, it's a personal, and even though they insist, oh, you should absolutely, because it's exchange of energy, you give, they give, and then you are neutral. But my personal perception is like, no money.
Any other great stories or comments?
Yeah, my question is more informative. It's to Eileen. She said at the end of her presentation that Aristotle and Confucius were going to into dialogue again. But this is quite contrary to the accepted history of philosophy, because modernity came from the abolition of scholasticism, which was a creation by Aristotle, who was called the philosopher in those days, and the return of Platonism, which led to an explosion of mathematical implementation in physics and research. Also, Plato was read again thanks to translations from Arabic sources, and the works on politics by Plato were far, far more influential than that one book that Aristotle wrote. So I'm wondering, how can you combine these two, the official story and the reports of your friend, together?
I was reporting, not agreeing necessarily, and had I more time, I would have pointed to a whole lot of ways in which I disagreed. I mean, Plato's ideals are very much holistic approach in one sense. Almost everything you say actually can be shown round the other way. And Nisbet himself is aware of this to some extent. But he and various other people have done an enormous amount of studies, mainly admittedly of college students, in both the West and the East, which seem to show certain things like looking at the individual in the West and the family, the role that you play, being part of the community and the whole in the West, and in the East, sorry. And I think there is a lot of truth in that. And I think we have seen that in religions, particularly in Protestantism. You can go from Protestantism, extreme, sort of we free, like the Scottish Protestantism I was brought up in at one end, through kind of evangelical Protestantism, Catholicism, Orthodoxy perhaps, as you move further east. There's a sort of geographical pattern. And I think there's enough of it in common parlance to make an argument that the new religious movements have been more receptive than the mainstream churches in promoting what's now called spiritual but not religious, where the, funnily enough, organization of the churches is rejected, and there's more emphasis on the individual, but it's a sort of spiritual individual that belongs to a higher universe. I'm probably not making this very clear, but there are a whole lot of paradoxes in it. But I think if you start from the idea, this empirical finding, albeit with the college students, which is always a bit suspicious, I think there is enough there to see new religions playing a role in filling a gap that was felt by a too materialistic form. Now, obviously, in medicine, which is something that's talked about a lot, I mean, I was astounded when in China I first had acupuncture, and I explained that my right knee was hurting, and I had a pin stuck in my left thumb, and I sort of wanted to say, no, 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 it's here. And I think that sort of approach can be seen to a large extent and is being undermined to a large extent with this Easternization with spirituality that you really can see and recognize in a lot of the new religions. Not all of them, by any means. Some of them go in the other direction. But I think there is something that's happening there that's quite interesting. I'm going the other way, which Rosita talked about with, going back to Japan, the sort of reverse missionizing, which one gets in a whole lot of different ways, like the African Christians coming to the Western Christians and telling them how to be proper Christians, which gets the poor Archbishop of Canterbury terribly upset. And my talk about what Julie was telling me this morning, where now the, what's the word I want? You tell me. What do you import?
This company, the boss, he is a United States person, and he lives in Ohio, yeah, and he built a company to import the herbal, organic herbal and vegetarians to make a powder from all over around the world. All organic farmers, and create the organic foods, and he export. He had been suffering from cancer. Yeah, he was suffering by cancer. He cured from Western medicine, from doctors for 3 years. But after 3 years, nothing happened. his cancer still, he was suffered by the cancer. But finally, he was cured by the herbal, by the organic foods. So that's why he built a new company to export these ideas from United States to the world, around the 165 countries from United States to the world. Yeah.
It doesn't answer your question. It's complicated. Okay. At least it got the question raised by you, which is a plus.
I had for Eileen this symmetrical question, because he asked why Aristotle and not Plato, and I will ask why Confucius and not Lao Tzu, because, you know, Confucius, I have a paper coming on the interpretations of Confucius, but at least in the last 100 years has been put more in relation, perhaps falsely, but that's another matter, with a rationalistic tradition whose triumph is this year in China. There is this wonderful TV series which is mandatory to watch, so it's the most watched in history of Chinese television, because you don't watch it, you go to jail. That's a very good way of promoting TV series, which is called When Marx Met Confucius. And it's based on a story by Guo Loru, who was a communist writer of the 1920s, but it's somewhat modernized. And so you see this discussion, it's long, it's a series, you can find it subtitled, between Marx and Confucius, and then at some stage also the spirit of Lenin comes down from the spirit world. But in the end, they'll all agree that they are partially right and partially wrong, but happily there is one who is always right, and is Xi Jinping. So that's the... So Confucius is used in many ways, but today in China, when Xi Jinping has been the first modern Chinese president who did the pilgrimage to the birthplace of Confucius, is mostly regarded as an embodiment of rationalism. So Xi Jinping would say that not even Western rationalism is really Western, because Confucius invented it before.
Yes, well, there is, I think, a growing, at least when I've been in China, I have noticed over a 10-year period an increase of the use of the concepts of harmony and role and sort of filial piety and things, which is a very good controlling mechanism, which President Xi has caught on to. But why I talked about Aristotle and Confucius was because that was the example used in a book that a member of a new religious movement in the East was telling me, as a Western sociologist, I should read, and being an obedient Western sociologist, I did read when he told me to. And I was looking at how he was seeing it in part. And, well, as I said before, you can make up the stories in all sorts of different ways. But I think there is enough of a kernel of truth in some of the ways in which the Aristotelian, well, in connecting with the medicine in particular, of looking at the particular cause and perhaps the symptoms and things. But I can argue against myself. But
Bernadette?
Thank you for all these exchanges, but I wanted to add something, is that we seem to, in fact, turn the West into something extremely rational, mechanical. And I come from a family and from the countryside, and we've had for millennia the same, you know, category, I mean, the same type of people healing through herbs, medium, spiritual healing. It can be completely done within Catholicism. We have a lot of cases of Catholic priests performing such, you know, healings. So I think that the new religions that we see now, they do bring in something from the East, but they also revive, or at least they don't revive it because it has never died, but they make it maybe more official. And in England, of course, you would call that neo-paganism, but we do have a lot of groups in France that are not neo-pagans, they're basically pagans. They call themselves usually we have a lot in Brittany, for example, Celtic groups. But I don't think we should separate radically, compare West and then different from East because of this and that. There are strata, really, of all these things we've been talking about. And I have a cousin who does that, and her first customer, if I can say so, was a Navajo Indian from New Mexico who lives in Bordeaux. And she performed rituals for him. And he couldn't believe it because he thought he had come to live in the country of rationality where all these rituals were considered as, something to send you to jail. And, so we do have that in our own culture. So I think we shouldn't simplify so much, the differences between East and West, or at least simplify what the West is. But there's a general discourse that has tended to hide it, but it's still there.
I don't disagree with you that a whole lot of things were... I mean, my stepfather was a general practitioner, and he did the weirdest things. Like if somebody had a wart, he would write down the name and put in a certain drawer in his desk. He used leeches and all sorts of things. You can find all sorts of things going through the ages. But in a sense, what I was drawing on was what might be seen methodologically as a heuristic or Weber's ideal types. They're not meant to reflect the truth, but to give people a template against which they can argue, as you have, which is fair enough, and you can point out, and you learn by saying, well, it isn't like that. But there is enough, I think, there to make it a useful comparison to make and to see how the new religious movements, which is my main concern, are acting to increase the cross-generation of ideas in medicine. And that's really...
And they bring out also this old tradition.
Can I just ask if Kaodai gets involved in this at all?
The Western thing in Gaodaism.
Western characters.
Victor Hugo.
Yeah. And, Victor Hugo, basically is one life of a saint in heaven. And this saint is responsible for the overseas missionaries. So Victor Hugo is not a saint, but is a life of a saint in heaven. And because, through spiritualism and Victor Hugo in, the spirit of a saint, and then he's instructed a lot of different things related to how to, cultivate. And also he gave, through spiritual writing, the scriptures in Gaodai. For the scriptures in Gaodai, we have two different types. The first one, we say the Tenjing. It's been the scriptures to the divinity. And the Sijin, it means like the scriptures to the human being when we have the secular affairs. And many of those scriptures were written through spiritual writing by the spirit of Victor Hugo. So he was considered, because we got a painting of Victor Hugo. But basically, he's just one life of a saint in heaven. And in this third time of universal salvation by God, and Victor Hugo and the spirit of Xun Zhongshan in Republic of China, and also another saint from the 15th, 16th centuries in Vietnam. They are the three saints of Gaodai in this third time. They represent the human beings to sign the third alliance with God. To bring about, we say, 博愛公平 means like the universal love and justice to human beings.
You hear me? Sorry. Let me elaborate a little bit about Victor Hugo. Victor Hugo come to us mostly by translating all the Vietnamese term to French. And from the Vienna and from French, we translate into English. So mostly he teaches us how to translate the Vietnamese term into French. That Victor Hugo come message to us, and he gave us some prayer in Vietnamese. Now I have a question again for Eileen. You know, I'm getting old, so I have all kind of illness. And I saw one of the sharks you say ingesting, and you will put water, and you put lourde. So I assume that you can ingest holy water in lourde, right? And the next line, you put salt and oil. Can you explain to me where can I go for holy oil, holy salt, and holy oil?
Well, holy salt, you can go to the Unification Church, and they have holy salt that Reverend Sun Myung Moon made holy, and it gets, there's a sort of central supply, and grains are taken and they're mixed, and then that bit becomes holy salt, and then you get a bit more, and so it can get fairly diluted, and he does that with some wine as well. But you can go to the Catholic Church, or you can go to a lot of Christian churches which have holy oil, sorry. At our recent coronation of King Charles III, he was anointed with holy oil, which came from the Holy Land, from Israel, Palestine, Judea, and in a very special kind of way. So you can go to them. I'll give you the address if you want later.
So I can go to Chairman there. Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks everybody. That's all the time we have today. Thank you to our presenters. Very enlightening time. Oh, okay.
Is there enough time? There's probably not enough time, right? I'll try and make this as quick as possible. I had one question for Brother Elmer. If I remember correctly, Jing Qi Shen are represented on the Cao altar. Could you tell us how they're visually represented?
You mean?
I think so.
I cannot get your idea, you know. Like,
oh, right. So on the altar, when you're making an offering, there are 3 items that represent these 3 treasures?
Yeah. Basically, you know, like traditionally when we worship, and then we will present the fruit and flowers. Fruit and flowers represent our physical body. And the wine represent our qi. And then the water represent our soul.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I was hoping for that detail. And one quick one for Rosita. You mentioned that Takata's version of Reiki has been spoken of as perhaps being feminized. Did you observe this to be true, or what do you think about this?
No, I don't think it's true.
Okay.
Just it's in particular in the Western world, I believe that the majority of the spiritual movements, the participants are women. Okay. Because the spirituality, we talked a lot about it. I believe that the spirituality in the East is perceived from a different angle. Why in the West is this mostly very mental, right? Very rationalistic. So only the women, they are very quick to perceive that there is something else, and they tend to look for something more. And that is the Western phenomenon that mostly is feminine, but it's the equal teaching for men and women at the same time. So it's just the people who are responding more quickly.
Yep. Thanks to everyone. Thank you. Yep.